Talk business and politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to the program. Elected to office in 2014, Leslie Rutledge is Arkansas's Attorney General. She is the first female to hold that office. She is the first Republican to hold that office in Arkansas. Welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Thank you, Roby. Great to be here.
We got a lot to talk about. There's a lot happening in legal circles. Let's begin with the state of the Republican presidential race right now.
Oh, my goodness.
Shall we start there?
All right.
Donald Trump looks like he is on track to be the GOP nominee. There is also conversations that there could be a contested convention. What do you expect to happen? What do you maybe hope will happen?
What I hope will happen that the Republicans will do just like we did in the Southeastern Conference. Any given Sunday, Arkansans, we're going to be cheering against Alabama. We're going to be cheering against Alabama. Come bowl game time, we're going to be cheering for the Southeastern Conference. And I hope that Republicans will come together, get behind our nominee, and defeat Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton come November.
All right. How do you feel about Donald Trump? Could you get behind a Donald Trump candidacy?
I will support the Republican nominee. If Donald Trump is our nominee, I will support him. I will support John Kasich. I will support Senator Cruz. If any of those three gentlemen are the Republican nominee, I will support them.
There's a new poll that was out this last week that shows that Donald Trump has problems connecting with female voters, that they perceive him in a negative fashion. There's no concern on your part in terms of how Trump connects with women voters?
I am confident that the Republican nominee will have the support of all the Republican Party, but we must go beyond Republicans and speak to all Americans, because what we cannot afford are 4 years of Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton.
Let's talk about what happens if there is a contested convention, a brokered convention, an open convention, whatever you want to call it. Do you think that sets the Republican Party back? I mean, just with that kind of fracture, that kind of fissure?
Well, Roby, most people may not know that I was counsel at the Republican National Committee 4 years ago during the presidential cycle. I do not believe that we will have a contested convention. I believe that we will have a nominee before we get to Cleveland, before the convention, and that we will be rallied behind that individual and ready to take on the Democratic nominee for November.
Do you think the rules get changed in terms of how the convention process works? You've worked in that before.
They did change last time. Right before convention, that's when the Rules Committee meets, and then the convention delegates vote on those rules. And so it is a bit of a tangled web, but again, when I go to convention in July, I will be representing Arkansans and the will of Arkansans. And that's what's important for folks to remember, that delegates represent the will of Arkansas voters and the Arkansans that came out in our primary March 1st.
So let's just say that we do have an open convention process, because I just want to hear a little bit more about how this works, because you've kind of looked into this. So the first round goes around, votes how the states selected them to vote, per se, as you've just indicated. But then what happens if there's not a consensus candidate, if there's not a majority of delegate votes at that point in time? How does it work after that?
Well, certainly, then there goes to a second vote. However, an individual must be nominated in order to receive votes, and based on the party rules, in order to even get into to be nominated, you have to have a majority of 8 states. Majority of the delegates from 8 states.
That rule could be changed.
That rule could be changed. Right. It was changed last time, right before the convention. And so, yes, it certainly could be changed. However, I don't foresee that. I am confident that the leadership will get behind the front runner, the presumptive nominee, just as they did 4 years ago. 4 years ago, the Republican National Committee named Mitt Romney the presumptive nominee in April, although Mitt Romney did not have half of the delegates at that time. He did not have half of the delegates until later in May, or possibly even June, if memory serves, but certainly not in April. And so I think that we will start seeing the Republican Party coming together. The Democrats are equally torn apart between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. There's just 2 of them.
Yeah, and 8 years ago when it was Obama and Clinton, that really didn't get resolved until the convention for the Democrats.
Certainly, and when you look at the numbers, President Reagan was behind Jimmy Carter by, I want to say it was over double digits, well into double digits in January, February, March. And so when you look at Donald Trump's numbers, when you look at Senator Cruz's numbers in comparison to Secretary Clinton, it's not that different from what we saw in 1980 or even 1988 for that matter with George H.W. Bush and Dukakis. Dukakis was well ahead at this time. However, we saw how the result was. We had President H.W.
So let's talk about the Supreme Court. This is obviously going to play out in presidential politics this next year, or the rest of this year. Contentious Washington, D.C. debate over filling Justice Scalia's seat. Democrats and the president say there's plenty of time to make a decision. Republicans say let's wait and let this presidential election year determine what the people may want. Do they want a Democratic president or Republican president to make this next appointment? I'm pretty sure I know where you come down on this.
Sure.
So go ahead and state your position.
I joined with almost 24 Republican AGs from across the country applauding the efforts of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Judiciary Chairman Grassley for exercising their constitutional right. The president has exercised his constitutional right by nominating someone. However, it's the Senate's, that's why we have checks and balances, is to have the president nominate and the Senate confirm. In 2012, the people spoke and reelected President Obama. However, in 2014, the people spoke again and put a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate. It's a great example of checks and balances, and when we let the people's voices be heard, we are better served.
But by that same logic, I mean, are you not saying that no decision should be made since the 2014 Senate went to the Republican side if there's some sort of contentious issue between Democrats and Republicans?
Sure. Well, I think that the people's voice should be heard, and it will be heard in the November election of the direction of our country, of whether or not we want a president who will appoint a liberal member of the Supreme Court or a conservative member of the Supreme Court.
You think Justice Garland is a liberal member, would be a liberal member of the Supreme Court?
Well, I think that that would be determined over time should the Senate move through with the hearings and so forth, and we learn more about Judge Garland.
You think that's how the framers of the Constitution, though, wanted the process to work in terms of, hey, let's wait till the next election cycle to make these kinds of determinations?
Well, I think that they wanted the people's voices to be heard.
Haven't
and
they
that's
been
why
heard?
that's why they gave the president the opportunity to nominate, the responsibility, rather, to nominate, and why they gave the Senate the responsibility to advise and confirm. And so they are advising at this time.
I would say at least precedent has been all over the place on this issue. If you look back at history, there's been a lot of lack of anything really clean.
And both sides. This is not, and so I think there has been a great deal of hypocrisy on the left for demanding that Senate Republicans automatically confirm President Obama's nominee when Senate Democrats have done exactly that sort of thing.
Let's talk about dark money. This came up in the Arkansas Supreme Court race. You are certainly familiar with some of the forces that have played in that space before, the Judicial Crisis Network in particular. There are some ideas floating around to change disclosure laws in terms of how this outside political spending is done. Do you support some of the ideas that are out there? Do you have a position on that?
Well, as I stated in 2014 during my election, when so much dark money was spent against me, nearly $2 million was spent against me in dark money, Roby. And I stated then, I will continue to state, I believe we are better served when more sunshine comes in. And last week, being Sunshine Week, I think it's a great time to talk about it. More sunshine comes in. If someone is going to spend money in Arkansas on an election and they name a candidate, we should know who those individuals are, or the name of the organization, as well as who their donors are.
Yeah. Have you seen Representative Clark Tucker's proposal that would have that basically a 72-hour kind of window of sunshine?
Well, I met with Representative Tucker during the last legislative session about his bill. I did have some concerns with regard to the First Amendment, constitutional rights being not trampled on, but hurt in the sense that it had limitations on how much individuals could spend. So I had some concerns. However, he did put that before the committee. It failed in committee, but I will him or anyone else, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter, and to talk about a bill with regard to allowing more sunshine in and disclosure on who these individuals are and the donors.
About 30 seconds left. Would you push the governor to put this on the call for the special session?
I will certainly be open to visiting with the governor about anything that he wants to put on the special session. But my job as AG is to advise whether or not it will be upheld or challenged in the courts, and I want to continue doing that.
I'm going to pin you down one of these days.
One of these days,
yeah,
Roby.
All right. Leslie Rutledge,
thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
All right. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. A look at news and a deeper dive into the state of tourism in Arkansas. When we come back, I also sat down recently with 3 of the state's top business leaders, Murphy Oil Chairman Claiborne Deming, Deltic Timber CEO Ray Dillon, and Entergy Arkansas CEO Hugh McDonald. Excerpts from that conversation right after this.